Hey fellas, as always, please do not target, bully, harass, dox, or attack anyone mentioned, referenced, or featured in this particular video. This is merely my commentary on some old internet drama that had a bearing on me personally and is neither an invitation or call to attack anyone. With that all being stated, let's go ahead and start the show. Hey, what's going on, everybody? To Japan back in action here, talk about something else today. About something else? Let's pull a story from the backlogs. Something a bit more personal to me than some of the other dramas I'm aware of. Because this one hits close to home, and I'll share why in a bit. I don't think this story has ever been officially told, so I'll go ahead and open up about it and tell it from my point of view. It might open up old wounds, being older drama from the backlogs. But hey, on this channel, ain't nothing truly sacred. Am I right? I record this from VRChat. VRChat, as you may or may not know, is a social platform built atop a game engine from which thousands upon thousands of people can enjoy the company of others in the online space. From the environments, to the avatars, to the likenesses, all of this is artificial. It's not real. But for our purposes, you can pretend it's real. As VRChat grew to become more popular in the early years, there would be those that sought to capture the experiences that could be had here in real time, for the fun and enjoyment of the online masses. They were known as VRChat Twitch streamers, or refer to themselves as VTubers, in spite of that being a separate thing entirely. Yes, there's Dervish and Donuts and that King Dingo guy, but while I know of them, I don't know them personally. But I had known one personally, as a friend. Y'all ever heard of an individual by the name of TechieFoxx? TechieFoxx was a friend of mine from Toronto, Canada that I had met on VRChat years ago. He was stylishly distinct, personable enough, and seemingly decent and cordial. He embodied the look and visage of a typical furry e-boy, with a slender figure, being an azure blue fox with piercing blue eyes, and jet black hair with trimmed bangs. With aspirations to be another social media influencer, he began live streaming a lot on Twitch, wanting to hit it big as a VRChat live streamer. And hey, with over 4,000 followers by the end of it, I'd say that's pretty damn impressive. Damn impressive for somebody that just decided one day to get into the game. Way better than me at just over 300, but I didn't do the same things he'd do. I treated it like a hobby, whereas he wanted to grow big and put a lot of effort into making it big. He was prolific enough to gain a following, and as his community grew, as it became more well-known and followed, he brought on admins and mods to handle his growing community. Playing games and creating spectacle on VRChat. Only way up from here, right? If you look up TechieFoxx today, you might see hints and signs and fragments that such an individual once existed, but no more. No account with that name still stands on Twitch. Mind you, this is TechieFoxx, with 2 X's at the end. There are a few TechieFoxxes on Twitter and YouTube, but they're not the same person. One being an American-based individual dealing more with tech stuff, another being from Australia, another being an inactive furry from another time period of the furry fandom entirely. So, not this guy, not that guy, not this guy, and certainly not that guy. This guy right here. And to emphasize that fact, as the writing of the script for this particular video, the account on Twitch was deleted, quote-unquote banned by user choice, i.e. deactivated by Techie, or someone aligned with Techie about 6 months ago. So no Twitter account, and other platforms like Instagram are completely devoid of posts or content now. So what happened? Well, it's simultaneously complicated and yet easy to point out. I'm not in the habit of blabbing on or revealing things on camera about my friends, former or current, so don't worry. Their intimate, deep, dark secrets, their personalized problems affecting only them, the issues they might complain to me about, that's just impolite, and not everybody wants to be featured in a video like that. But hey, no one's perfect. What a betrayal that would be. But in Techie's case, you'll see why I open up about it now. Friends aren't content. Unless they want to be or otherwise okay with it, but there's a lot of information about the people I know that I just kind of have to withhold, compartmentalize, and keep private to remain polite, reliable, and dependable. Trust is a hard thing to come by these days, don't you know? And I'm a YouTuber, not a heartless monster. I tell you, moving forwards, trust and credibility are going to be the next big currency to get shit done. But I digress. I wish people could afford me the same courtesy, but there's not much that's held in such high regard between people these days. Anyways, Techie was a fairly soft-spoken, chill sort of guy that prominently wore a blue fox avatar when on VRChat. Piercing blue eyes, jet black hair. He had an archer base later on, but yeah, speaking to him, I recall no sense of urgency or suspicion that there was something off about him, at least not overtly. I will say it felt as though he were kind of reserved by comparison to some of the other people I'd come to meet, but generally did the same kinds of things everyone else did. Hung out, played games, talked more directly about casual or more personalized things, drank alcohol. He was among just one of several furry circles that I was aware of and frequented at the time. I remember him mentioning in passing that they grew up as an orphan. For what span of time or under what circumstances, I really can't say. It felt rude to ask, so I just kind of let him talk when he mentioned it. If you're curious about the significance of why he even brought it up in the first place, well, it pertains to the story he was telling at the time. He had previously lived in a sort of shelter group home with other orphans as he was growing up. I can't say his upbringing had any bearing on what came out later, but he recounted to me a story while living in the shelter that he and the other kids he lived with were generally given a small allowance to go buy things, usually at a hand-me-down thrift store that they'd be taken to. Makes perfect sense to me. If you're an orphan, everything's a luxury, because the home or care facility you're living in is operating on a budget. But still, orphans deserve to have things, let alone nice things. He bought some electronic thing that already had a USB thumb drive in it, and just kind of kept it after buying the thing without really telling anybody about it. Getting one over on the system and sticking it to the man. As in, it probably shouldn't have come with it free of charge. Ooh, that cheeky little TechieFoxx. Wonder what was on the USB thumb drive network thing. Could have been the Epstein files for all I know. I mean, one thing I'll mention, from what I recall of what he'd talk about and the kinds of things that sort of led up to his time on VRChat, his name is derivative of his interest in computers and technology and things. Obviously. Regardless of his background, he seemed fairly well adjusted, all things considered. Sociable, friendly, easygoing, although kind of reserved in some way, like I mentioned before. And maybe for good reason. Perhaps all of the makings of a good influencer Twitch streamer type, because it would be in that time that he decided to try his hand at being a Twitch streamer and live stream his time on VRChat through Twitch. And that went alright for a bit. He started a Discord server and quickly grew, set up a schedule and grew and grew and grew, until one day he took in someone we already talked about on the channel a while back that had, by that point, adopted an entirely new identity and was back on the internet. And perhaps more uniquely, was on VRChat for once in their time online that I know of. Now, you might remember me warning about an individual by the name of Empress Sombra. Other aliases and identities are Spharynx the Cute Foxo, Cynthia the Dragoness, a couple others after that, but we'll get into that later. So, a shape-shifting, drama-mongering cuddle whore whose seemingly innocent and harmless demeanor covered up something far more sinister about them. And while their predilections were seemingly benign, once you got to really know them, well, they were a monster in sheep's clothing. He, she, they like talking to minors. Sexually. Okay? So they were less a benign presence and more of a pedophile groomer. But that's not all. They had a bad habit of integrating themselves or trying to integrate themselves to streamers in their communities. Be they furry streamers they saw as targets that they could get clout from and possibly even blackmail them for their own benefit. So they were an all-around piece of shit, right? But who were they this time around? Well, they decided to be male this time around. Male presenting, anyway. A fella by the name of Nova Sitterfang. And before you ask, yes, they were a sneck. A sneaky sneck. Not so sneaky they weren't found out pretty quick, but a fun-loving sneck. Kind of like Donuts, if y'all know about him. That fun-loving gray sneck that loves big tails. Wonder if mine's big enough. They were initially received well by Techie and seemingly integrated in Techie's community quite quickly, though only adjacently. They appear in a few selfies that Techie shot as one of the many hopefuls that could potentially be brought in and allowed into the Discord and be allowed to interact with the other members of the community. They played games, hung out. Nova probably seemed pretty odd, but it's VRChat. Odd is just one label amongst many for those that call this place home. We're all a little crazy here, Georgie. We all float down here, Georgie. I mean, ahem. All seems well at first, right? Well, as you should know, unless you can really compartmentalize and put on a good act, old habits die hard. The things that make you you will come to the forefront of your behavior when you're around others, eventually. Certain traits, bad habits, and old behaviors are going to follow you, no matter what mask or avatar or persona or identity you happen to put on or adopt. People are going to find out eventually, and with the connectivity of the internet, even people who had no idea who you were have the ability to find out pretty quick, especially with how relatively small the VRChat furry community happens to be relative to the rest of the fandom. So what happened? Nova Slitterfang initially lurked in Techie's chat, but to foster goodwill and as a show of good faith, he, she, they made monetary donations to Techie's stream. They appeared on VRChat to add presence to their desires of getting to know not only Techie, but also the rest of his community. While Techie doesn't really touch on that when he opens up about it later, there would have had to have been some initial contact here on VRChat. But what I think happened is, presumably, after welcoming Nova, Techie and crew would try to vet them. So Techie taps one of his admins to take a look into Nova Slitterfang and got a little bit more than he bargained for. That admin decided to try Nova Slitterfang out on Discord call on the pretense to see if they were all that in a bag of chips and were really cut out for the community. Reaching out on the pretenses of friendship, the admin got Nova into a call to speak to them and get a feel for them. And what they got, well, they received a full-on confession that Nova had run from his country of origin, the UK, all the way to Brazil to dodge the authorities. Damn. Scared to death that the cops are going to come for him after bragging about one of them not being able to do anything to them due to them being in Brazil. See, the cop was from the UK, so no jurisdiction. It turns out Empress Sombra had been arrested previously and had bail conditions set. No contact with minors below the age of 16. Sounds easy enough. So they admit to it, but then says he didn't do it. Obviously. So which is it, Nova? Did you or did you not have inappropriate contact with minors in complete violation of your bail conditions? We all know what the answer is, but this is a problem on VRChat and Discord servers, by the way, with Nova just kind of waffling about and coming to the rationalization that the bail conditions set are borderline impossible to follow due to the fact their desired spaces are going to have minors in them, be they Discord servers or VRChat at large. Also, in Techie's video, he mentions that he figured out their true real-life name and identity, though it differed from what I was aware of. Which one sounds more or less fake to you? Philip Bauer or Nathan Schultz? Techie came up with Nathan Schultz through his admin's questioning of Nova, while I was under the impression they were Philip Bauer. Again, which one sounds more real? I mean, it's entirely possible that they started out as Philip Bauer, and after getting caught, changed their name or alias to Nathan Schultz to try and get people off their trail. Unless this is just another fake name in a long list of fake names and identities they've relied upon thus far. So TechieFoxx and the admins were not about to let Nova into the community, let alone continue contacting them, and went on the offensive to get as much information on them as humanly possible to send to the authorities. By the time TechieFoxx opened up about it publicly, Nova Slitterfang had already gotten Techie's Twitch channel suspended twice. Not sure how, but regardless, prompting Techie to come forth one day to warn the public of what he knew.
Hello, my name is TechieFoxx. I am a variety streamer. I primarily focus on Twitch, but I also do a little bit of YouTube things, which is why we're being posted here. And that's my Twitch channel is currently suspended for the second time, thanks to somebody by the name of Nova Slitterfang. This is a friend of mine, and this is the recording. So he recorded the entire screen of him talking to this person on Discord. So that's what you're going to get to see here right now.
Siren Canine?
Yeah, he's the guy, he's the police officer from Cherokee Council, the deputy sheriff. And
So he's a police officer and he tried to come after you.
he can't come after me, but the thing is, he can't do anything out of his units because he's Cherokee County Police, which means he can only do stuff that's in jurisdiction within his own area.
Why? So
He can't do something outside of that.
So why? Where are you at? If you don't,
Brazil, I come from the UK, but I'm in Brazil now, so he can't really do shit across the country that far away, anyways. And he also claimed I was that Cynthia Dragoness. That was my old name. Yes, I was that person, but I am not the same person. I'm not that person who did that shit. I already made, I was arrested once. I had my bail papers. Do you know what my bail papers say? My bail paper says not allowed to contact anyone under age of 16. When you're on VRChat, you cannot avoid that. Like anybody under the age of 18, you cannot avoid it. You cannot avoid talking to people on Discord in a server that's under the age of 18. Them are unavoidable.
okay.
I've already broken my bail condition. Nobody's gonna know about it because I'll delete my fucking Discord before they even the police check it. But the thing is, the fact that they're going after me for this shit is really fucking scary. I did not do this.
No, you lie! You lie!
Okay.
I'm about to break down into tears because this is scaring the fucking shit out of me.
So you really can't
That's a recording that my administrator of my chat, who we will leave nameless at the moment, but some of you already know.
Though I am suspicious of a few of the details provided. Techie clearly had more direct contact with Nova and can be seen in several pictures together with them, suggesting that they at the very least hung out on VRChat on a few occasions, which would imply Nova had tangential contact with members of Techie's community. But in any case, Techie contacted the Brazilian authorities as well as the UK police and the FBI for this person to be put on their radar, being exposed for being a disgusting pedophile who thirsted for minors. Nova Slitterfang as an identity very quickly had to be retired in order to obfuscate their true identity, because bewares were very quickly circulating on Twitter. The people found out, but that wouldn't stop Nathan, or should I say, Philip Bauer. Oh no, 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 no. They weren't done. They weren't about to let Techie walk scot-free. Not if they had anything to do about it. So, Nova very quickly became Sakara Devourer, adopting yet another brand new VRChat avatar and identity from which to hide behind. They were now going to be a wicker beast. They were a dark blue wicker beast with yellow eyes and black patterns, if memory serves me correct. Let's see if I can fish up a good picture or that video from about that time period. Now, how complicit they were in anything that followed or happened next remains questionable to me, but the narrative that formed in my mind is that in retaliation for being put on full blast online and having one of their latest and greatest identities exposed, I could see them having a hand in Techie's downfall, however slight. But perhaps I'm giving them just a little bit too much credit there. I mean, they got Techie's Twitch suspended twice, enough to rouse Techie from Twitch to YouTube to shine the spotlight on them as a problem. I wonder how they managed that, to be perfectly honest with you, because what happened next was surprisingly unexpected. For the time, anyway. So it was back in July 2023 that Debby, aka Tallest ZX, just her Twitter handle, comes out with a thread to expose Techie, calling them out as a sick and twisted pedophile that groomed one of their friends. They dumped a bunch of screen caps that we'll be taking a look at here in a bit, but the thread still stands today. Techie doesn't. What does that tell you? That's just one issue. And with that, a ton of other bewares came out in rapid succession, all testament to the same thing. That Techie is a local Toronto area furry that is a sexual pedophilic predator that needs to be avoided at all costs and hopefully arrested and deplatformed for their crimes. What would make them all immediately turn on him like this all at once, in unison, unilaterally? Even Oshawa Fur Meat, a local Toronto-based fur meat, immediately banned Techie for the safety of the meat and its attendees. Why would they act so quickly without an inquiry or an investigation or anything like that? Well, it's because the individual running it was involved in all of this. What was their role in all of this, you might ask? Don't worry, we'll get to that in a bit. Debby clarifies that she is not a Canadian, and, at least at the time, lived in the United States. They don't play VRChat. They admit to being a complete outsider, but noticed the disturbance and pitched in, like most furries otherwise would, to try and nail a would-be pedophile. Grumpy old Cole wasn't impressed about any of this and chided the event for not taking his warnings about Techie seriously 6 or so years ago. Now 2.5 to 3 years after that, so about 8 years total. A strong "I told you so." Then he probably segued into an old man rant about how kids today and how youngins like us don't heed their elders or something like that. In spite of the cascade of bewares and warnings that people began to circulate, people immediately called bullshit to try to defend Techie's good name, calling the evidence a complete fabrication for the purposes of smearing Techie. And Techie certainly wasn't going to take any of this lying down. He immediately confronts his accusers and threatened to out them. With what, I honestly don't know, pressuring them to delete their thread and just walk away. Because it's just that easy, right? Namely Debby. But Debby, just one of his accusers, stood her ground completely unfazed. In fact, she invited the community to share any and all stories that people have to share that might corroborate and incriminate Techie further, of which several stories are relayed in private and selectively shared with the masses. Apart from this, you got a little hearsay. No police reports or anything substantive, no personalized detailed accounts, though it mirrors the usual pattern where someone gets exposed for X, Y, or Z, and those with alleged connections or experiences with the perpetrator all open up about it one after the other, while not opening up about their identity. In all fairness, these were personalized accounts related to very specific people who opted to keep them anonymous in order to protect them. But still, while I don't necessarily outright doubt the claims, the lack of detail, thorough detail, like names, dates, the set of circumstances or the experiences in their entirety, let alone the individual making the claim, makes this hearsay. Someone saying someone close to them was groomed by him and even had real-life contact, and the fact that they were targeted by him in the exact same way, with assurances to the general public that they'll get the police involved, no problem. Why they didn't do that the first time around, I guess they just didn't have the nerve. Not trying to victim shame, not trying to victim blame, but it is just kind of weird how so many people opened up about it spontaneously, and in all of this, nobody thought to call the police or basically tip them off and say, yo, this guy's sus as fuck. Another living at Kitchener at the time recalls wanting to go to the Oshawa Fur Meet, but noticed the bus schedule didn't quite line up with the hours of the event, wouldn't be running by the time they were ready to go home at around closing time. Techie offered them a place to stay, seemingly as a favor to them, as a friend. Aww, what a nice guy. Then proceeded to wait until the very same day of the event to add a very important stipulation to this individual staying the night. Sex would have to happen in order for there to be a roof over their head for that night. OP said they weren't interested, so Techie rescinded the offer and tells them to find somewhere else to stay. What? No sex? Then why the hell am I gonna let you stay here for? Get the fuck out of here. Someone added that Techie actually tried doing that with them as well, so they didn't end up going to the event at all. It's just like, wow, what an opportunistic piece of shit. The fact that this all revolved around the Oshawa Fur Meet and the details surrounding the circumstances of their interactions lends credence that some of this might be true, but proof, hard proof, was not forthcoming with these testimonials. Because personally, I'd like to see some damn screen caps, even censored screen caps of conversations of Techie saying and doing all of this. But hey, maybe that was provided in private and just not privy to the public so as to not jeopardize the pending police investigation that might have happened after the fact. So if true, several people were well aware of Techie and what he was all about, allegedly, recognizing him as an all-around sex pest local to the area and would-be pedophile groomer. I say would be, as the implication thus far was that he was attempting to groom underage minors some years ago, without a confirmed victim or successful attempt. While hearsay and details look scant, it certainly doesn't look good when several disparate individuals with no connection to one another all start piping up about you all at once at the mere mention of your name. This all would have had to been a few years before his time on VRChat, by the way, which doesn't really matter ultimately, but it's an interesting detail to mention now after the fact. When Techie was still on Twitter, Techie wasn't fazed by any of this. Outright called the Discord account fake and was all like, people know me. That they know he doesn't and can't go to Fernal Equinox for some reason, and that his Discord handle was something different back in 2018. That he could prove that easily, and he had a boyfriend. Ooh. And that he was unfazed, but because he can't spell unfazed with a Z. Because poor literacy is cool. So he can't go to Fernal Equinox? For those of you that don't know, Fernal Equinox is that furry convention based in Canada, more specifically Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It's the same video that we referenced that one incident that happened with that Pup Bello guy that showed up on the dance floor and completely stripped nude and, danced the night away naked. Yeah, that furry con. Would otherwise be TechieFoxx's home con if not for the fact that he can't go. Why can't he go again? He acts like he wouldn't, but then follows up with he can't. So, and if you can't go to a furry con, that generally means you were banned for whatever reason. That's not a good look. It could have been for something dumb, or it could have been something for something like serious, like what we're talking about right here, right now. Techie assured Debby that he was going to fight this every step of the way, that he wouldn't take getting slandered lying down. To quote him, doesn't matter who people believe. There will always be people that believe what you don't want. You're about to go out as a pedo supporter. And then, nothing. Debby stood her ground. God bless her. Techie condescendingly says, if you want to walk away and delete this nonsense, now's the time to do it. Because this won't go down the way you want. Debby stands her ground. She will not be swayed. Then Techie says he's going to go ahead and make some food and go about his happy life, safe and sound, that he'll talk about this next stream. That he was done talking about this on Twitter for the time being. Techie wasted no time pointing the finger at Nova Slitherfang, Sakara Devour, Pinky Nardo, all three of which were known to be active at the time. He claimed full innocence and that all of this drama was built on lies and slander. Supposedly, Wesley Foof is or was his boyfriend, who just kind of shows up one day to say, "Hi, I'm Techie's boyfriend." His 14 following and 1 follower didn't convince me that Wesley was really real, let alone the absence of posts or anything like that on his account, and a fundamental lack of anything tangible to his name or a presence, like a banner picture or anything substantive that signified that he'd been around for a little while. Could have just as easily been a sock puppet account to provide a momentary roadblock or momentary pause to the Twitter hate mob. One interesting detail that was pointed out, while Techie always came off as a big gay boy on the internet, he's technically pan if a former roommate can be believed. Techie tried to suggest he's not sexually attracted to anyone or anything IRL, which is why he lives entirely in virtual reality. And it has to be furry for him to get interested in the first place. That was his defense against the allegations. That because he's ace or asexual to anything not already in virtual reality, that he wouldn't be interested in girls. So this whole situation was bogus and full of shit. I'm curious if that's a reflection of his obsession with VRChat, which would have been a more modern development, not necessarily the case prior to discovering or getting on VRChat in the first place. Because the testimonials alleging Techie to be an opportunistic sex pest and a groomer suggest a very different story. In any case, his argument was refuted by the fact he was spotted IRL wearing a pansexual wristband and going to events where both guys and girls were present. So he was kind of full of shit. And others would attest to this fact. Hell, people were willing to testify this in court if need be, if it ever got that far. Is that how far we've sunk so low as a society? That man is gay, Your Honor. But not in reality. In reality, he's pansexual. I seen him wearing the pansexual wristband. Sees it with my own 2 eyes. My God, could you imagine? Among troublesome claims, Techie was supposedly in possession of CP at some point. Of what it actually was, whether it was drawn furry cub porn or actual pornography, actual cheese pizza, well, I can't say. Draculion comes out and says that he took a look and saw shit he probably needed eye bleach for. While unproven, I'm just going to go ahead and say at this point, I would not be surprised. And it's just like, okay, Cole, okay, we get it, you told us so. But you don't have to keep repeating it and going around saying the same thing over and over and over again. God damn. No, seriously, Cole appears several times throughout all of this to basically say the same thing. I told you so. But as far as people in Techie's corner that stood up for him and would defend him through thick and thin, even Majira Strawberry believed in TechieFoxx. Okay, not really. but can we just stop and pretend like he did? Okay, I kid. Tin Crash, an artist from my distant childhood, reached out to Dragoneer for comment to see whether or not a single artist came forth to defend TechieFoxx's good name. Dragoneer still being alive at the time, the late Dragoneer had nothing to say about this. He probably couldn't give enough of a shit, or wasn't about to expose his laundry list of bad actors and bad friends for the sake of a random VRChat Livestreamer. About the most outspoken of Techie's defenders that expressed a heightened level of scrutiny and doubt at just about everything being presented or asserted was one TechieFoxx. In these kinds of situations, there's always some resistance commensurate to how popular someone happens to be, so this isn't abnormal. But you start to get secondhand embarrassment as Calidus goes off and seems increasingly unhinged and unreasonable, devoid of any logic, reason, or sense in the face of reasonable doubt, or growing evidence that Techie probably wasn't the stand-up guy Cal thought he was. It's always good to push back a little or express scrutiny at outlandish claims, but there comes a point you're just arguing more for ego than for any reasonable cause like sticking up for a friend. Kind of like all those Kiro stands that went out of their way to pull damage control for their idol, until it was practically irrefutable that the dude was guilty through and through. A lot of people wound up downplaying their involvement in the sense or deleting past embarrassing comments. Calidus formally laid the blame at Nova Slitherfang, who, I will say, seems like the likely culprit here, but not in the way you all might think. Empress Sombra ain't that smart. They're pretty dumb, actually. But persistent. Now there's a name I haven't seen in a couple of years. Jimmy Thong is someone I knew once upon a time here on VRChat that stepped up to plate to defend TechieFoxx's good name. And his best defense is, he doesn't speak like that to people, nor does he insist on sex. And the name isn't even right on his Discord and Telegram, so he must be innocent. What a fucking lazy ass way of looking at all of this. So he doubted the screenshots right out the gate. In spite of the fact that it had been a couple of years and things tend to change over a relative span of time, the doesn't insist on sex thing is purely circumstantial, since how someone is around you may not sync up to how they are around others. I haven't even spoken to that cat in years, but there's a strange way that people on VRChat, knowing, seeing, believing in someone that they know directly whenever controversy unfolds around them, that the dude was blind to small details. I wouldn't be surprised if he were all in on TechieFoxx's little community and ran around on VRChat with him and just kind of took it for granted by virtue that TechieFoxx was so popular that he was probably innocent in all of this. Oh, how wrong he was. Rezi follows up with how the chat logs are fake and can be faked through a YouTube video that's no longer posted online anymore. That's always a good sign. Anyway, no, the chat logs weren't fake. This was another misguided lost soul that tried to stick up for their friend in spite of mounting evidence to the contrary. Anyway, the concern surrounding TechieFoxx by his growing detractors was the fact that being such a controversial figure allegedly guilty of a string of past transgressions could not be allowed to have a platform, nor could he have access to children on the platform. You're not supposed to be on VRChat in the first place unless you're at least the age of 13, hence why we now have age verification, with some people taking it a step further than that. But there's been plenty of instances we've seen someone we suspected of being even younger when little Billy gets their first Oculus Rift headset for Christmas or their birthday by their rich bitch gullible ass parents. So while 13 is the absolute minimum someone should be on the platform, it could be even younger than that, in practice and actuality, which is a concern. And I've seen the good and the bad present itself in public instances. I think Furry Talk and Chill was about the worst in that regard at one point in time, when Superb Pedro was still running around exposing groomers as part of his community service. We should really be a little bit more thankful for that. Well, that's all just the Twitter circus, right? Techie was all safe and sound in his ivory tower, separated from all of this and more or less protected IRL. Safe and sound behind locked doors, right? Well, what happens when real life comes knocking on your door? What about the people he was living with? Because Techie was in for a rude awakening if he thought all this was just going to blow over. Life comes at you fast, right? Because the next turn of events would be quite drastic.
FBI, open up!
So the Twitter circus continued and remained ongoing. But something rather unexpected happened in real life in the midst of all of this. See, Techie lived with roommates. And guess what? The Oshawa Fur Meet was run by TechieFoxx. And Sparks was just one of a handful of people that lived in the same household with TechieFoxx. TechieFoxx is, or at least was, a furry that had their own Twitch presence. Marginal at only 81 as of today, but prominent enough to have run their own fur meet and have a following on Twitter. A lot of his accounts still stand today as a testament to his time in the fandom, but his role in all of this is a bit more direct than some of the other Twitter bewares and threads that were made about Techie after the fact. Because Sparks was one of the more vocal members of the household that were roommates with TechieFoxx at the time. This would have probably been July 7th, 2023, because all of this seemed to have begun on the 6th. The series of events that I'm about to relate to you happened, but it's unclear how and in what order apart from a few pieces of evidence I have from that time period. The extent of certain events remains somewhat ambiguous and unclear even now. But while the Twitter shitstorm was going on, Techie's roommates, being furries themselves at the household and already on Twitter, very quickly found out about all of this, being a part of the Twitter shitstorm already, but also being active participants IRL. What would you do if it came to your attention that one of your roommates was being accused of being a pedophile and there was just enough evidence to support that allegation to make you concerned? I get the feeling that the whole household all got together, talked it over, and then Techie got a knock on his door with everybody being all, "Hey Techie, we need to have a chat." And were you Techie? How would you respond? How would you handle it? Because you gotta leave your room eventually. Can't just stay holed up in there till the end of time. Unless you want to jump out the window or something like that. In any case, there was some sort of confrontation about it, with questioning that followed. Enough that this led to Techie having an adverse reaction. Perhaps years of dirty, reprehensible deeds and the fear of having to answer for those actions finally caught up with him and resulted in him going into a blind panic. Or he's just a very anxious guy. In either case, he seemed to enter a manic episode during questioning, having a complete mental breakdown and becoming a danger to not only himself, but those around him. Sparks only showed a little clip during the questioning.
Tell us a little bit more about it. Yeah, explain what happened. Someone making an allegation that you're grooming a girl for a number of years, but she's like 18 now?
Not a number of years. No, it stopped in 2018. It happened in 2018, and it never happened ever since.
Okay, I read the call card, I think, yesterday.
It's very short. There's supposedly a full hour and a half worth of it that remained private after the fact, but what little was said spoke volumes to me. Something that remained truly memorable in my mind. The one shouting I can confirm is TechieFoxx. No doubt about it. I recognize his voice fairly readily. And this was clearly being recorded in the middle of a discussion, an argument, presumably during that manic episode that got everybody upsetty spaghetti. It happened back in 2018, it stopped in 2018, it stays in 2018. That's what he meant to say, right? I know that's not literally what he said, but still, this spoke volumes to me. So what happened in 2018 stays in 2018. But what happened back in 2018? That could have been when Techie first entered VRChat, but it would appear as though something more damning happened during that time. We'll get back to that in a bit. If whatever had happened was bad enough, mind you, Techie would have already been on VRChat for about a couple of years at this point. I would imagine that the virtual space would have also insulated TechieFoxx from reality to a certain extent, and more importantly, from a shady past. I mean, he had friends here. He had a community here. He had community support here. But he'd be in for a rude awakening with all of this when being confronted by reality through the very same people living with him at the time. Hence why it makes perfect sense to me that the worst of what was being held against him would be brought up and cause him to go off the deep end like that. He thought he had it all figured out, and all past dramas were dead and buried. He probably wasn't in the best mental state to have to face reality of the situation, leading to that adverse reaction. Would have just loved to have been a fly on this wall to watch it all go down. Anyway, Techie was clearly in an agitated state and wasn't about to stop, displaying a lot of concerning behavior apart from the yelling and screaming. Techie had sent them a picture of a knife and had apparently gone off the deep end for a long while now, which put them all on edge. Amidst the noise, someone, possibly even concerned next-door neighbors, decided to call the cops. Could have been one of the roommates of the household. It remains unclear, even now, as no one stepped forward to admit that, but as another roommate put it, they got swatted. Also, please be respectful about this next part. I post this only as proof of a disturbance that shit happened. But this was considered to be a domestic disturbance, as Techie was in a highly emotional and unpredictable state. So the cops were called and came to take Techie away, and Techie was quickly extracted from the household.
Me.
That was you?
You're good. Yeah.
Is there anybody else in your place?
It's just him.
Okay. There's nobody else?
Nobody else is in the house,
No
no.
other tenants in the basement?
No. No, that tenant is out. They're out right now.
They're out. They're not
My
here.
cat, but she's probably hiding somewhere. Yeah. Holy shit, fuck.
Tried to do it. That's what but they're not going to do that. They won't do that.
Sparks posted proof of this in a short video clip recorded from the second floor of the house, presumably to shut TechieFoxx up on Twitter and remove all doubt for those to bear witness, and to corroborate the full scope of the disturbance. Because this wasn't just a couple of cops, this was a bunch of cops in a fire truck. Well, it is Canada after all. It's clear Techie caused quite the disturbance warrant this kind of police presence, however excessive, but his behavior did put a few of the roommates into a blind panic, prompting them to leave the house for their own personal safety during the disturbance. Supposedly gave one tenant a seizure with how much stress they had gone through. While it came off as one of the tenants of the house leaving temporarily out of fear, no, they all left. Sparks reaches out to the community to ask if there were any kind locals that could take them in for the night. Maybe 2. 3 people, some stuff, and a cat. Not a very big ask from a mutual, am I right? Even when Techie was extracted, the rest of the house had no idea when Techie would be back or what would happen after the fact. The Twitter circus continued. Now, this next part absolutely did happen, but the timing is inexact. Did the roommates first manage to secure lodgings at a local hotel or a local mutual, came back and do all of this? Or did they do all of this before they left, hoping to avoid TechieFoxx completely? Because yeah, while he was out, his roommates broke into his room to look for evidence, I guess, namely on his PC. But if it's password locked, I can't imagine they get very far with that. They went through all of his things, allegedly slashed tires of his car, and later, everything was on full display on Twitter. My question is, when the police left and took TechieFoxx with them, did they even bother locking the door to his room before they left? Or was it left unlocked and they just kind of waltzed on in and started going through all of his stuff? Because I can't imagine they literally have broken in, like bust the door down or picked the lock or anything like that. Anyway, Techie's Twitter account was temporarily suspended at some point during all of this, mind you. Be it because Techie said something truly concerning, or whether he was mass reported by his detractors, well, I can't really say. Either is plausible at this point. None of this looked good, by the way, because Techie was later released of his own recognizance and came back to all this shit, and, fairly reasonably, complained about it online. His Twitter account was back at this point, a fact that was circulated far and wide. So his suspension couldn't have been very long. One of those 24-hour suspensions I recall being a popular go-to when Twitter wanted to bap someone on the nose for something they did naughty. I remember very distinctly either him telling me more directly or tweeting about it. That his room was broken into, that all of his stuff was rummaged through, that they tried accessing his computer, and that they'd slashed his tires. Meanwhile, his roommates were simultaneously surprised that he'd gotten out so quickly, but were also furious and wanted him the fuck out. Clearly. Gone. Away. Vamos. Pronto. And this was relayed to him fairly broadly by his roommates and their friends on Twitter, as Techie returned to complain and plead his case. Okay. Sparks and friends, regardless of their reasoning, justification, or rationalization, did break the law. Multiple laws, in fact. A fact that Calidus definitely harped on. Trespassing and vandalism mostly, though I don't know the nature or conditions of their particular living situation. I don't know if this was a rented house where everyone living in it was a renter or tenant, more than likely the case. Or if someone, through a fortunate twist of fate, was the owner of the house with all his furry friends as tenants. As for the car, yeah, you don't get to just slash someone's tires like that, even if they are a pedophile. But because they're a pedo bear, I don't feel bad they did it. In terms of the law, though, then it comes down to proving without a shadow of a reasonable doubt who done it. Sparks Enzo, or anyone else living on the property. Maybe the vandalism ghost of justice showed up and went to town on Techie's car out of spite for pedophiles. Who knows? But one of them must have done it. With Techie now back on Twitter, then these internet slap fights happened, but TechieFoxx had deleted his accounts before I could see most of them. But it's implied through the responses that he argued that he didn't have the money to just up and leave like that. Most of us wouldn't. But the roommates didn't give a shit. Sell your things, live in your car for a while, find a hotel. Oh my god, but not without me internet. Anything but that. Their response? Tough fucking shit. Sell your VR headset and face reality for once in your fucking life. Yeah, Techie didn't just play VRChat, he kinda lived it, being a captivating enough alternative to reality. Enough that people picked up on that fact and couldn't help but poke fun at that and make light of it. After everything going down on Twitter, the stress and relentless onslaught against him and everything he stood for was getting to be a little bit too much. Techie threatened and suicide baited, saying he'd commit suicide by car. This was construed as a way to elicit sympathy and also make Sparks and the rest of the household look bad in the process. I'm not really sure how Techie intended on committing suicide by car with 4-slash tires, but okay. Maybe he got a rental car in the meantime. Now, I don't need to tell you all that he didn't end up going through with all this, because he'd end up coming back to Twitter eventually after a little while, to people mockingly asking what he was doing, still breathing in their midst. While people expressed a variety of different reactions, someone questioned whether anyone in this whole crazy train of interaction even bothered going to the police. Sparks declared yes, all materials were being passed along to the police for a thorough investigation. Attaboy. So while Techie was back at the house and his roommates had already stormed the proverbial garrison, busting up into his room and going through all his stuff, the only contact they really had with him now was online. On a public forum, no less. Twitter itself. One very important piece of evidence had been discovered amidst Techie's belongings when this room got raided. One whose significance and relevance would become apparent very soon. I didn't catch it at the time, but going back and forth with his former roommates, internet slap fights, and all the bullshit that resulted, there was a key detail that kind of exposed everything for me. So Techie had a dry erase board and did a little art on the side. Just doodles. Shit that you draw because you were bored and need a little decoration around the room. Or the household, for that matter. It's a fairly common thing in the furry fandom. Furry households will typically have a dry erase board, especially when there are roommates involved. Although, the only one I readily think of in all of this is the one from the Peace Wolf Jason FX Kabir dramas. Anyway, this would become a significant and relevant piece of information. So he had a dry erase board that he'd doodle on at the household, presumably to de-stress and add a little pizzazz to his life in relation to his roommates, because multiple people drew on the same board. It's a playful way to interact with the same people that you live with, indirectly, or convey reminders and so on. It was through his art and handwriting that you could compare those to his fur affinity, which was a bit sparse by the time I got to it. Only 2 posts.
This was hand-drawn by him. This was hand-drawn by him. This was hand-drawn by him. This is hand-drawn by him. This was hand-drawn by him. Just notice that the strokes, they're very angular. It's very beginner-type art. It would be very hard to recreate, so I just wanted to show this here.
Taking a look at his fur affinity posts, a few interesting details can be gleaned. Just as an aside, taking a look at his hand-drawn ref sheet, gender is listed as both. So, hermaphrodite. I mean, it says so on his profile in the group he joined, so, okay. Looks 16, but is really 906. Oh, so he's one of those people. My enemy wife who may only look 13, but she's actually 3,000 years old. Hee. Okay, his spelling is shit in either case. An Arctic fox fennec fox hybrid. Does not age and can shapeshift. Okay. And a paw print tramp stamp? Yeesh. Okay, don't take these at face value. They're like 10 years old and was probably the product of a different time period altogether in Techie's life. Like, if his profile is anything to go off of, and should you take it at face value, it sheds some details about his life at the time. I'm not sure when this was updated, but it lists him being 25 years of age, with the mind of a bisexual female. He also mentions Skype, should anyone be interested in adding him, so... With VRChat in mind, becoming relevant much later, like about 2018, 2019, regardless of how old Techie would have been then at the time of writing, that was about 8 years ago from today. So, and at the time of his cancellation, 4 to 5 years. So he would have been an adult well into his 20s at the very least, if not his 30s, I'd imagine. Which just adds a troubling layer to all of this. I mean, why explicitly state your character didn't age past 16? Canada's age of consent is 16 years of age, but still. More importantly, as to what pertains to what sort of ties all this together, amongst the pictures that were found when his roommates raided his room, one stood out above all the rest. More specifically, this one right here, Something the Wolf, age 13. Interesting detail, huh? Censored to obfuscate genitalia and the name. So he drew cub porn, effectively, just like his pal and favorite furry artist would have liked. I'll mention them in a little bit. And this wasn't just some random character, mind you. This was clearly gift art for someone in particular. Someone from Techie's distant past that would come back to haunt him in an unexpected way now. Because this would link up to an event that occurred back in 2018, where all this stems from in the first place. The very same event that Techie cited that was recorded in that quick clip of him going off the deep end. The very same event that his roommates were questioning about prior to this whole mess unfolding the way it did. It's worth mentioning that Techie was friends with Zosh, the infamous cub porn furry artist and alleged rapist. Totally a not concerning at all detail. He even appears as one of his favorite artists on Fur Affinity, and Techie hadn't posted in over 10 years. Zosh is really someone that deserves his own video, but in brief, he's an artist known for drawing sexualized cub porn and being an altogether controversial figure. In other words, a piece of shit. On forum-style site 8chan that circulated the kinds of crap he'd draw, Techie just kinda comes out and says it, to make a point. That Zosh probably don't give a shit about his art being shared on an ass crack of a website like this. Oh, I know Zosh. I'm friends with him. He wouldn't bother commenting here with you bottom-feeding degenerates. This would suggest a tolerance or an interest in cub porn, which while not as damning as real-life CP, is pretty damning to me because it suggests an interest on your part that you're into that sort of crap. The gray area only comes into play that it's a work of fiction, a fact that leaves that gray area paper thin, considering the theme always comes back to older characters having relations with younger characters, and furries generally like to see themselves or imagine themselves as their personas, so you do the math on that and voice your own opinions about it, okay? Techie drew that for someone they were chatting with on Discord back in 2018. Lacking a scanner at the time, I guess he took to taking a picture with his phone given how relatively crisp the image is. The IP address from the photo being sent to online using the metadata was said to be found within a kilometer of the old house that Techie had lived in prior, cited by Sparks. The dry erase board and Fur Affinity come into play as comparisons to the art and style and methodology, which all seem to match very closely. Techie was, for lack of a better term, an amateur artist, and relied fairly heavily on very angular strokes to draw anything. A very tenuous grasp on form and figure, let alone drawing straight lines. But in any case, the other component to all of this are the Discord messages themselves that were posted earlier. We'll read them all here shortly, but let's talk about the Discord account itself first. At the time, their actual screen name would have had a 4-digit code at the end, a fact that came into play at the time when you want to friend someone or find someone. Not today, obviously, but visually it would have popped up as Blue Fox Techie. The Discord being faked is something that was discussed in detail. Techie and his defenders, namely TechieFoxx, dismissed the Discord conversation entirely as being fake. You recall Rezi even posted that video showing how easy it is to fake Discord messages. A video that is now deleted, but I digress, as I mentioned before. Always a good sign. Anyway, the Discord messages clearly show a conversation with two people. The dispute really rests on whether it was Techie's account or not. What Techie was doing was changing his handle to try and confuse those observing it and trying to distance himself from the more incriminating of messages that came from him. Well, there was a bit of back and forth about these Discord messages being fake. Notice the Discord member since date never changes regardless of what Techie changes his screen name to. It's always April 29th, 2017. The tagline name that I remember so much is the one known as the Immortal Object, displaying his Archer avatar that Techie was using late in his time on VRChat as a Twitch streamer. But you could change your tagline name all you want. It won't change other details about your account, let alone the people you personally messaged. Calidus tried to suggest, presumably citing Techie's credibility, or lack thereof now, that Techie's Discord had been hacked a while back and that the name in Discord didn't match his. Well, no fucking shit. Techie kept changing it armed with the knowledge of what his name was back then, and splitting hairs now to throw everyone off his scent. It's important to note that everyone was watching Techie like a hawk at this point, so his attempts at changing information from his end didn't go unnoticed. Like, anytime a major change occurred, someone would announce it as just another in a long list of attempts to obfuscate the facts. Now, I will admit, the Discord messages read off as a little bit one-sided insofar as how desperate Techie seems to be in trying to get Wolf Girl to come out of her shell and talk to him, to trust him, to like him, to love him, who remains coy and seemingly oblivious throughout their interactions together. But that's just what predators will do. Try and coax someone into a false sense of security, because either ass or pussy are on the table, depending on the gender of their desired target. In this case, it was pussy. You gotta massage the oyster a little bit to get it to open up, so you can get the pearl. Or to fuck it, as Techie seemingly wanted to do. Techie played along to this and kept this up for a long while. He was clearly trying to get her to come over and do the do later on. And to what extent? Well, let's go ahead and read the damn messages, shall we? I don't know. Up to you. She wags her tail. Wags also. Would have more freedom if you came here. And I could show you Canada. Sounds fun. Do you like to RP? Sometimes. What kind of RP do you like to do? I'm open to whatever. I like simple. Just like one sentence. Licks your cheek. Boops you. Giggles and boops back with my nose. Runs around in circles. Anytime, pretty wolf girl. Do you need me to wash you too? Or would you like me to just help when you need it? Sure. Curious, if we meet IRL, would you really let me do this, or is this all RP? Sure. Would you let me? Mind if I ask your age? I am 13. Nose bleeds like anime. Did Spooky tell you my age? No, she didn't tell me about you. Oh, does age matter to you? I don't know. LOL. Endless, you broke the camera off. You can't disable it. Anyway, if you don't want to be a pet, that's fine. We can just be friends. I do, though. But I'm really not allowed. I'll be in trouble. Want to join Telegram? Then you can chat and send anything without anyone knowing. I just want to stay on here, please. If you came to my house, would you show me? Okay. If you were in my house and I asked you to get naked and cuddle with me while we watch movies, would you? Yeah. Promise? Promise. You can be my pet. When can you come over? Fox, my Sona. Okay. Am I feral or anthro? Because I'm a pet wolf. I like anthro. Okay. Want me to make you a mom, cutie? But I'm your pet. Rolls over. I want to learn tricks. You are my pet, yes. But since we are both anthro, we can breed too. What kind of tricks? Any you've heard of? No. When you visit, will you sit naked and let me teach you tricks? I'll give you belly rubs and treats if you do good. Okay. Take a photo of your butt and send it to me. You're breaking rules anyway, and fact is, your parents probably wouldn't like our convo anyway, so you're not going to get into any more trouble for it. I can't, though. Sure you can. Tap the plus icon on this chat, it'll give you the camera option. I dare you to do it. I can't. I'm sorry. Sorry. Just get to me already, then. The real you is better than photos anyway. Why do you want to see my wolf butt? Can I teach you about sex? It's really fun. Okay. You're gonna have so much fun here, I promise. I'll buy you any food or toys or clothes you want once you get here, too. Yay! Just get here soon. I really want to be with you. Well, you're 13. Still, it's a good age. Also, I really like you. How old are you? I don't know if you told me. Does it matter? I don't know. But I have to go. Leave me messages, please. Bye. Love you. I miss you already. No. Any ideas how you're going to get here yet? No, not yet. You should ask to come to Fernal Equinox in March. It's in Canada in Toronto, and I'll be there. Maybe you can convince them to leave you there for the weekend. It's a safe furry con. I can try. Do you think it would work? Maybe. Please, really try. I want to snug and hug you so much. And maybe more if you want it. What do you mean more? I don't know, kissing, and maybe I'll teach you sex if you want to learn it, but I won't force you. Promise. But it would be a lot of fun. What is it? You're 13 and don't know what sex is? Your parents should have explained it when you were 10. Sorry. I don't know. Well, sex is pretty easy and it's a lot of fun and it feels really good. Basically, a boy you like puts his boy parts into your vagina and it feels amazing and better than anything you'll ever feel. You push the boy's part in and out over and over again. It feels better the more you do it. Oh, would you want to do that? Promise it would be a lot of fun. Okay. Legally, you're a young adult once you turn 12. They can't control you. Oh. If you don't want to follow their rules, you don't have to, and there's nothing they can do besides maybe ground you, and legally, they can't lock you in your room, so you can just leave anytime. And they can't kick you out till you're 18. 13 is the best age, because you're an adult that can't be stopped or touched. You can do anything you want. But I'm a kid, not an adult. At age 12, legally, you're considered a young adult. You're not a full adult yet, but you're a young adult. Basically, you're a kid that can control their own life. Oh. Understand? Yeah. So now that you understand, if I asked you to take a photo of yourself, what would you say? No, because I'm still not allowed. I'm sorry. Tell me, if you were here right now, what would you want to do? We can do anything. I don't know. What do you want to do? I want you to pick something. I want you to have fun. Tell me something you've always wanted to do. There are no rules with me. You can do anything. I don't know, though. Really, you can do anything, and you can't think of one thing? No. So you just want to do anything I tell you? Sorry. Okay. Well, I guess that's okay if doing what I say makes you happy. Hey, since you're my mate now, does that mean I can get you pregnant if I wanted to? Or do you not wanna? I don't know. I don't get it. You will sneak away from your parents and let me teach you sex and try to get you pregnant, but you won't show me your butt? If your parents see this convo, you're getting in a lot of trouble. So why not just have some fun? I can't try. Can we just RP, please? I don't really like RP. I don't think you really plan on seeing me. But I do. But you know you would get in trouble if your parents knew, right? No. Your parents wouldn't want you seeing me, or having sex with me, or would get into a lot of trouble. If they knew you were talking to me, you would never be allowed to use Discord again. Oh. Do you understand now why I think it's weird you won't share photos? You're already going to be in trouble if they find out you're chatting with me. I mean, I guess. I don't know how he expected to get her into his room without his roommates noticing. What was he gonna do? Sneak her in by window? Or buy his roommates all tickets to an event he was gonna go to? Sorry guys, you all go ahead and head out without me. Enjoy the Coldplay concert. I can't go. Got someone to do. I mean, some stuff to do. So, grooming a small child of 13 years of age, allegedly, through love bombing, role play, like calling them a pet, teaching them about sex, through artwork, as in sending her at least one picture that was probably drawn by a disgusting smut peddler like Zosh. While cartoonishly villainous as a conversation, the fact that it takes on a dynamic tone and goes on for so long, the more real it all seems. Not the usual clipped Discord messages taken completely out of context. No, we got quite a bit of history here. So Techie was talking to a little girl that Techie was trying to coach and coax into sex. Okay, 13, so a teenager, so not quite a little girl, like 7 or something like that. But still, when compared to someone like, say, 18 years of age, for all intents and purposes and to the eyes of the rest of the internet, a little girl. Techie was well into his 20s by the time I met him, though I suspect he was actually in his 30s. And that little girl wasn't even close to 18 until about the time Techie was getting canceled, by the way. Not that that changes a goddamn thing. Intent and effort undertaken was certainly there. That picture just confirms that Techie not only drew it, but that it was received by that little girl. As far as I know, this was the only minor with evidence as well as testimonial that corroborates that this person was, in fact, a real person and a minor at the time of their interactions, and that TechieFoxx was putting the moves on them through Discord. I say this because while there are a lot of suggestions of other victims out there, their identities or evidence of their online presence or real life presence for that matter exists only in the form of testimonials. Presumably, Sparks and friends are privy to all of this information and pass that along to the authorities like they said they would. As to her name, where she was living, and other identifying details unique to her, the Discord messages and the fact that she was supposedly contacted in private and remained anonymous after the fact is the only proof of her existence. And of course, none of this was good enough for TechieFoxx, who entertained the notion that there might have been a minor involved, but their age was probably so close to Techies that he actually tried to say that Romeo and Juliet laws might come into play here, and that this wasn't evidence of grooming, pedophilia, or anything like that, and on top of which, try to suggest that it wasn't sexual in the least. I don't know, Calidus. When you get to talking about the benefits of sex to a little girl and ask her if she'd do that with you, well, that's pretty fucking sexual in my book. Don't know what you consider sexual or not, but Techie wasn't aiming to bring her over to play some Super Smash 'em Up the Brothers or anything like that. And again, the combination of factual information in Techie's profile, 10 years old at that point, marking his age 25, well, you do the math. Either he puffed up his age a little bit more for whatever reason, or updated his profile sometime after those two drawings were uploaded. In either case, by that point, who the fuck was using Skype when Discord was readily available? Techie was probably at least 30 to 35 years old at that point. Techie did try throwing mud in Sparks' face by submitting a Fernal Equinox support ticket, saying Sparks was an active pedophile and that he needed to be looked into. But nah. Techie appears as TechieFoxx this time, with 3 X's, not just 2, and states that he assisted in covering this all up and that he legally needs info from Fernal Equinox staff on this. How he wrote it comes off as a rush job, though this did make Sparks and friends laugh. I mean, clearly he was in on it, participating in the cover-up and corroborating Techie's activities. Clearly. But Techie? Techie was now Audi 9000. Smoked out, left completely, entirely, but not without leaving a little something behind. You know, before Techie left, he left a little something for Sparks and friends to find, something to remember him by, something to cherish those wonderful memories of. Yeah. how things should have probably wound up in the end. It's impressive to me that he took the time to print out a glossy picture from VRChat and left that for the household to find as a parting gift. Remember Colleen Ballinger making the ukulele apology video? Scribe couldn't help but laugh at the Persona 5-esque calling card as a form of response to the allegations. Anyway, it is worth pointing out that Techie had showed his darker side when he low-key bragged about knowing exactly what to say when the doctor's examining him for a psych eval after his little episode at the household and possible suicide attempt, because his roommates were very surprised to see him come back the very next day. They were asking how he sweet-talked them into letting him go so quickly. As Techie realized he was fighting a losing battle, he very quickly deleted his Twitter accounts and went silent, possibly communicating on an alt account. He did leave an oblique message before he left, blaming those quote-unquote fake stories for ruining his life. He had an alt account prepared, Zazadeer, but its use and relevance appears to only be for the purposes of surveillance on his part. It didn't have much on it at the time. There was another alt, TechieFoxx, though that would appear on VRChat as someone observed. Techie tried to play it all off on his Discord server as something that was completely faked, and that he was the real victim here. That the allegations, the suspicions, and accusations were all artificial, not real. Bullshit built on lies. It played into the accusations and allegations that Techie was pulling something Discord fuckery, changing his handle to try and obfuscate the truth and mislead the public. But the people closest to all of this weren't taking the bait. Except for TechieFoxx, who really wanted his TechieFoxx to be back, apparently. So what's the narrative here now? Are people thinking his roommates just wanted to create this grand spectacle for the fun of it? Or hated Techie enough for being in virtual reality all day and night and wanted to give him a taste of reality? What's the grand payoff here? If they wanted to get rid of him, I'm sure there have been easier ways to go about it. In any case, the narrative pushed by Techie's defenders was that Nova Slitherfang, aka Sakara Devourer, was labeled the true monster here, and the point of origin for all of this. But that's giving them way too much credit. Sombra's a dumbass. They're not very bright, but they are incredibly manipulative and persistent. And with all the time on their hands in the world, presumably, they'd have the opportunity and energy to pursue action against people like Techie. I think what had ultimately happened was the fact that Nova slung the accusation after finding a few kernels of truth about Techie to sling mud in his face. But those closest to Techie now had a vested interest in verifying whether or not Techie were truly on the level. Like the people that were currently living with him at the time. This initiated interest in those around him to determine whether or not there was any truth to the accusation and whether Techie were truly innocent or not. So really, Nova, aka Sombra's only relevance to all of this was starting a snowball effect, which avalanched into those set of circumstances that I covered previously. Okay, so if Techie's truly innocent, why would a picture of a specifically labeled 13-year-old wolf girl be found in his room be the same artwork that was sent to a 13-year-old girl back in 2018? Clearly, it was from that formerly 13-year-old girl that the Discord messages could be sourced and who reported Techie for being a dirty pedophile. On top of the fact that they were likely talking to Sparks and friends about it now, from which Debby made the thread about TechieFoxx in the first place. Excluding the minor, the testimonials from before at least marked Techie as this opportunistic sex hound that tried to exploit those around him that could be exploited or coax people that could be coaxed. I'm curious if there were any other attempts or whether or not there were any other successful attempts with all of this in mind. Back on Twitter, Calidus continued to be an insufferable piece of shit every step of the way, being unnecessarily aggressively abrasive with the philosophy that if he's mean, pedantic, and as spiteful as possible, that will magically convince everyone of Techie's innocence and all of this will just stop and go away. Yeah, good luck with that mindset. It's been done before and continues to happen even now, and it doesn't ultimately work. If the evidence supports an allegation and there's enough of it to suggest a singular event where someone has a misstep in decision-making or a specific pattern of behavior, then people are going to know the truth eventually. Calidus even admits to the fact that he has no proof whether or not the Discord messages entirely were fake, just blames Nova Slitherfang for everything. Calidus got wild towards the end, demanding a full video be provided immediately, in spite of the fact that Sparks and friends were not only dealing with this whole ordeal, but also that they had jobs and lives outside of furry Twitter. Nothing was ever satisfactory for him. Nothing was ever good enough for him, and he pulled out all the breaks and stops to attack this at every angle, even being all, "You're literally pushing him to suicide." He pulled out all the breaks to try and defend Techie's good name. Hell, I wasn't kidding when I said they were pulling out all the breaks. They likened the whole thing between Techie and this minor as nothing sexual, like I mentioned before. Sparks retorted it was totally sexual, and then tried to use the whole Romeo and Juliet laws to suggest that everything was on the level, like the age of consent. Man, dude was bending over backwards to wriggle and maneuver any which way to make any of this look just a little bit better to the online masses. I don't think he really even read the Discord messages entirely, because he's going like 16-17 or 12-13. Y'all decided on. Which one is it? I don't know, Calidus. Why don't you read the Discord messages and you tell me? Wait, what? Calidus said he's not like other pedophiles? Oh my god. Oh no. Probably not the way Calidus meant for that to come out, but still, that sounds so bad. And why was Calidus against these allegations so strongly in the first place, anyway? See, he knew Techie. He said so himself. He was part of Techie's streams. He also said that right here. See, I hate these defenses. Oh, I know him. He wouldn't do that. He's not like any of the other pedophiles I've dealt with. It's the internet. You don't know a goddamn person here. Not me, not you, not your buddies you play Helldivers or Arc Raiders with. Not in the way you think you do. You formulate your opinion and perception of them through your interactions with them. And obviously, the longer you know someone, the better you know them. But really, you don't know them. You don't know the true them. You don't know what they're like in other contexts or environments that you haven't personally seen. You don't know what they're capable of doing when you're not around, because you hadn't seen it. It's not in your lexicon of understanding of another person. Therefore, you see one side of them entirely. And while there are a lot of people out there these days that are entirely one-dimensional and lacking a distinct personality, people typically are multidimensional, having varying aspects as to their mode of character. So the "I know them" defense don't fly with me. God damn. Calidus is just a fucking show, man. A fucking cartoon show. So go a fucking head. Insinuate I'm some pedophile alt account again. Go a fucking head. I dare you. I double dog dare you.
And I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
Because you making that claim really seems like you were just trying to start shit to try to get all my words called out as fake. Because you fucking can tell they aren't. I see shit like that on the daily. Acting tough on the internet isn't going to convince anybody that Techie's innocent. And in any case, nobody was taking Calidus seriously by the end of it. Dude might as well have been a fucking Looney Tune. Calidus's willingness to defend Techie's good name would otherwise be admirable, if not for the fact that Techie was found to be guilty as sin and unworthy of such a defense. There came a point where Calidus had long since come off as unreasonably illogical, and was largely disregarded by the masses, as more sensible heads prevailed to talk about what had happened. And the consensus was that Techie was guilty, and there was disbelief that Techie could be guilty, but it was accepted as fact. Please take note, regardless of how justified or right you feel, you probably shouldn't behave like Calidus did in all this. It doesn't help make your friend look any less guilty, and it doesn't make you look good to the rest of the internet. It just shows you as an unhinged wacko who's as gullible as the best of them. Thomas Jerome Newton wisely points out that amidst all this evidence, it felt as though there was credibility to the claims going back years that Techie was always a predatory jackass. And he found it weird that Techie's defenders saw his word as gospel in the face of all of this, ignored all the evidence, and just confided in Techie like he were totally innocent. Like with most things, Techie's behavior was a bigger indicator of his guilt than any of the evidence could possibly purport, and what was visible on social media didn't look good. At the time, I wasn't fully cognizant of everything going on, but I recall Techie being kind of distant and cagey after that during the brief time he was still present on VRChat. Understandably so, and while we spoke a few times in passing, he offered nothing truly substantive, and eventually he just drifted away. As far as I knew, he eventually live streamed a little bit more, but kept things locked down. I believe I left his Discord sometime in light of the accusations, and one day, a few years later, he was just gone. Just like that. A few faded pictures as faded as the memories I had of him. The thread still standing, the one-sided conversation still standing. Techie's legacy irreparably tarnished, branded a sexual predator, just another to the amorphous mass we're already aware of online. And that's truly unfortunate. It's better that he's gone, but I do hope he either faced justice to the extent that he was found guilty of in the end, or got the help he so desperately needs. Maybe even both. But I doubt it in either case. His behavior and responses shows me he's guilty as sin, but to what extent can only be speculated. But to cut and dash like that shows me it must have been pretty fucking bad. Now, whether the police up there did anything about it, well, remains unclear, even now. Apart from taking Techie away from the house to cool off and calm down, in terms of an investigation or arrest later, no arrest appears to have occurred to date. Now, what's crazy to me is the fact that SparksFox stopped posting on Twitter shortly thereafter back in 2023. He was done with the site for a number of issues, namely ads and the fact that over half of his friends had already left for greener pastures. He'd also mentioned he was possibly getting sued by Dan Skunk for past misconduct on Dan's part in an effort to cover up his tracks, and that he was building a case against him. Even a cursory glance that shows Dan to be a controversial and yet an elusive figure unique to Canada proper, tied to Fernal Equinox as one of the original founders. Although that was very short-lived, as he'd get kicked off the board and committee for quote-unquote ideological reasons. But he'd still try to use that fact as a chip on his shoulder to puff himself up as this grand leader type when he had less to do with the convention than a cousin twice removed. I can't imagine any legal action on Dan's part would have had any major impact on Sparks and friends, but Dan is also allegedly a predator of sorts, just a far more boring and desperate one. Dude's gotta be old now, having been in the fandom since it all began. Circa 1974 or something like that. I can't even say Dan's a has-been when he's a never-been. Lied about just about everything, presenting himself as a somebody when he's a nobody. Worryingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, the Oshawa fur meet, at least on social media like Twitter, has gone quiet as well. Whether or not it's even still going on today, I truly can't say. Enzo continued to be active for a while until about 2025. I'm guessing they also got tired of the ads and bots and moved on to greener pastures like Blue Sky. It was in 2024 that they were contacted by Techie and threatened under an alt account, which triggered them. By the way, whatever happened to Sakara Devour? Well, they became Pinky Nardo after their behavior got them found out after that, presumably after being found out engaging in the same kinds of behaviors that got them outed in the first place on their other characters. Cute character to cover up the fact that they're a pedophile, and to attract attention to themselves, encapsulating the ooh, I'm a cute femboy archetype. And after getting found out again, they became the Perpster, a speedrunner playing all the classic Nintendo games, until getting found out again, royally crashing out on Twitch. And running away thereafter. I can only imagine how many alts they became after the fact, because I will bet they're still running around online in some way, shape, or form even today. I can't overlook the irony of this whole situation, though. A predator exposing another predator, even indirectly. Like, that hasn't happened before. Or thereafter. Funny. I mean, hey, takes one to know one, right? Oh, don't worry. We'll be talking more about that whole mess some other time. That's a whole nother rabbit hole of insanity with a lot of details I hadn't mentioned at the time. It's a horrible thing. The guy you knew or thought you knew being revealed to be a disgusting predator. But what else is new, huh? Happens more often than I care to admit. I should know, huh? I see this shit on the tweeter every day. It's a couple years after the fact, and while he's gone, the memory remains strong in my mind as a latent one. That I knew him. That I considered him a friend. But now? All of this shit feels so normalized in the modern day. Not a day goes by that someone isn't being exposed for something truly despicable, like grooming minors or fucking dogs. And hell, the fact that we've got psychopathic satanic pedophiles operating at the highest echelons of power, courtesy of the Epstein files and everything people had suspected for years, well, the rot runs deep in our troubled modern world. Best thing I can say is to be wary of the people you meet online. the people you watch, the people you hang out with, the people you talk to, because here on the internet, there's that time-age-old lesson to be remembered. People aren't always what they seem to be, or as they appear. Your perception of someone is a composite of the conversations, experiences, and time you've shared together. It can be as whole or as distorted as the circumstances of your time together. Though unless you've really spent years with someone, the image in your mind may not be wholly accurate to a whole picture view of the person in question. In any case, I'm not the only one this has happened to. People have shared tragic stories of misery and woe with me about someone in their midst being into some sussy sick shit. It's like a pandemic, and only constant vigilance can serve as a hedge against that. You let your guard down among your friends, but do you really know them like you think you do? Kind of like TechieFoxx and his friends and troll shielding. How many groups of friends are out there, each with something to hide, each with something that they're guilty of, and something that they've yet to answer for, but remain complicit with their other friends because everyone's got something to hide at the end of the day. Techie was just another influencer that entered the limelight, found an audience and a following, got exposed, and then faded away. They're probably still around in secret, hiding in plain sight under a new name and an avatar or persona, as so often happens, but like me, people don't soon forget and will remember, and a few loose lips sink ships. Or online VRChat furry circles and Twitch careers in this case, one of the two. If you're curious as to why I bring this up now, I thought very deeply about it while thinking about my time here on VRChat as a whole. The people I've met along the way, the ones I know now, the experiences I've enjoyed, the things I've seen and heard. He was a part of it. A relatively small part of it, all things considered, but significant enough that I spoke to him, I hung out with him, I spent time with him. We were friends. But I can't even say he was just someone who lost his way with what came out after the fact. He was already a wolf in fox's clothing by that point, masquerading as a stand-up guy that people already had suspicions about to begin with. But see, they weren't on VRChat. He was insulated from that with an entirely new crowd of people like me and others he met in the virtual space. And yet, he was still given the opportunity to start his own community and establish a following and became a VRChat-based influencer. People warned that regardless of how well we thought we knew him on VRChat, that wasn't what he was like in real life. I guess not. People defended him until they were forced to confront the truth themselves. Or they never did. Perhaps they still believe him to be absolutely innocent in all of this, even today. The truth can be a scary thing to confront, and most people are averse to the truth. Sometimes you have to recognize a person for what they are. Are they your friend? Or do you have to face the fact that maybe, just maybe, you were friends with an irredeemable monster that put on an elaborate act and you were suckered in by a false sense of security, believing them to be what they always pretended to be, a decent person. For the vast majority of you, I would imagine your friends are as they appear. More or less decent people with love and a cheer for your company and are otherwise good people. But there might be some in your midst with a dark and treacherous past that you might need to watch out for. As always, be careful and wary of the people that you let into your life. Not all of them are going to have the best intentions, nor are they the best of people. And for some, their past history is an indicator of the danger they might pose in the here and now. Regardless of who you are, your past will follow you, and will affect how people respond to you and your presence, wherever you happen to wind up. They might be completely unawares at first, but once they find out, or once they're told, people can connect the dots fairly quickly. But I'm sure you're already a good judge of moral character and only let good people in your life. Till next time, boys and girls, I hope you all have a better one. Peace!